Camping. It's something we've all done at least once. If you thought I was referring to the leisure outdoor activity, you'd be incorrect, since I know for a fact half of you don't even know what color grass is. Okay, I'm sorry, that was kinda mean, but I couldn't help myself. Anyways, the practice of camping has been documented well throughout video game history, so much so that it actually has a Wikipedia page dedicated to it. I'm sure it needs no explanation for many of you, as we've all had the pleasure or displeasure of doing it or dealing with it at some point or another. Camping is almost universally seen as perfectly legal within the confines of competitive gaming, yet is condemned by the vast majority of players for being a cheesy, degenerative way to gain advantage or win matches, and Smash Bros is no exception to that. With the current meta growing more in the direction of whiff punishing and defensive play as a response to the earlier metas favoring aggression and high-octane matches, camping has become more prevalent, which makes me want to write a video talking about it. So we're going to take a brief diversion from my why no one/everyone plays content and talk about camping in Smash Ultimate, what forms it can take, why it's advantageous, why players hate it, and whether or not it's good for the game. Before we continue though, I want to announce that this video is brought to you by Opera GX. Opera GX is a resource-efficient gaming browser that has everything you want from other browsers, but with the added benefit of extreme amounts of customization. And just recently, they launched the GX mods, letting you completely change your browser's wallpaper, theme, browser, and keyboard sounds, as well as play background music. They have a wide variety for you to choose from. The mods are also in a template format, so if you ever decide to get rid of it, you can disable it and go back to the customizations you had before. There's also a bunch of other features like video pop-ups and music players, so for anyone who wants to watch YouTube without having to pull up an entire window, you can do that with Opera. And the same goes for music. You can also use social media and messaging platforms directly through the sidebar, including Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook Messenger, to name a few. The browser's main selling point, in my opinion, is the accessibility. Stay up to date with free games, the best deals, the newest releases, and breaking gaming news all in one easily accessible place by using the GX Corner. It's a one-stop shop to everything gaming related. If you're thinking about switching but don't feel like going through the hassle of moving everything over, you can actually synchronize your bookmarks, cookies, history, and whatnot from other browsers into Opera GX all at the press of a button. It's really convenient. Opera GX is constantly being updated with new stuff. I've actually been using it as my main browser for over 2 years now. Be sure to check my link down in the description below if you want to try it out. Thanks again to Opera GX as usual. They've been a good sponsor of mine for quite a while now, but let's get back to the video. The term camping initially comes from first-person shooter games, denoting the act of holding a position that offers you the highest reward for the lowest risk. For example, a player might hide in an inconspicuous location and wait for opponents to get within striking distance of them, capitalizing on the element of surprise and/or visual cover. Alternatively, they might hold place to avoid confrontation and wait for the other players to take each other out. There are two other styles that are denoted as camping, one being spawn camping and the other being base camping, also known as turtling. Spawn camping involves guarding the position of the enemy player or team spawn point on the map and killing them immediately on revival over and over. While not expressly forbidden, spawn camping is a colloquially outlawed practice on account of its unsportsmanlike intentions. Base camping is the opposite of spawn camping, where instead of holding a position offensively, you do so defensively, either because venturing outward poses too great a risk for the turtlers, or they're protecting a certain objective, such as a capture point. While versions of camping differ from genre to genre, the basic principle of camping is to obtain as much advantage over your opponent with as little exposure as possible, a notion that very heavily influences the competitive scene in Smash. Broadly speaking, defensive play has a tendency to overlap with camping in this game, primarily due to it placing the onus on the opponent to make the first move in a way that would cause them to overextend, which you can then exploit. However, a lot of situations can be interpreted as camping based on circumstance. The act of ledge trapping can be loosely defined as spawn camping, where the player on stage has more freedom of action than the player hanging off the ledge, whereby future interactions entail the player on stage continuously throwing the other player off stage in the hopes that they'll either take sufficient damage to be knocked out altogether, or get edge guarded or gimped. Conversely, characters with long-range pressure or fluid mobility will frequently exhibit turtling, actively playing outside of their opponent's threat range to avoid exposure to pressure. Seeing as how the majority of zoners are not the best in close quarters combat, it's in their best interest to never be within striking distance of their opponent, naturally incentivizing them to be as far away from them as practically possible. In an open battle arena where there's no shortage of places to camp in, developers forcibly shrink the arena over time as the number of players dwindle down, so that eventually the remaining competitors have no choice but to face each other head on. This is usually imposed via a force field that damages or kills you instantly if you're caught outside of it. Beyond sudden death matches, the blast zone remains in a set position throughout the course of a fight. Of course, this is made up for by stages being far smaller than the likes of an FPS arena. Even so, stages like Battlefield and Town and City are large enough to allow some semblance of camping, and those who stand to benefit from it are heavily inclined to do so. Seeing as how there are no external win conditions outside of taking out your opponent's 3 stocks before they do yours, the ultimate win condition of Smash is to maximize the number of hits you land on your opponent while minimizing the number of hits they land on you. With every fighter varying in size, mobility, and range, everyone has a proverbial threat bubble around them indicating where and when they're at the most dangerous. Those with a comparatively wider threat bubble than their opponent, for all intents and purposes, have nothing to gain and everything to lose by getting within striking distance of them. For example, you're playing Samus against a Ganondorf. If your only focus is to win, pragmatically, the only thing you should be using throughout the entirety of a set is neutral B and side B, as any other move puts you inside his threat bubble and therefore vulnerable to attack. Not to say Charge Shot and Missile have the best mileage, but seeing as how there's no exposure for using them, they possess the highest risk to reward ratio. It's this very reason that zoners are among the most contentious archetypes in Smash and by extension fighting games overall. Zoners have attacks or abilities that enable them to exert pressure on their opponent without ever having to open themselves up to counterattack, commonly known as projectile camping. This is especially problematic for those who can exert lethal pressure. For instance, even though Fox can damage opponents with Blaster, its non-existent KO pressure doesn't make for a very high reward despite the lack of risk. In contrast, Mewtwo's Shadow Ball eventually becomes a stock taker at higher percents, magnifying his threat levels against an opponent at kill percent. Not saying Mewtwo's a zoner, just using his neutral B for the sake of argument. All in all, while it may be seen as a very lame or even efficient way to play, those with projectiles have nothing to lose and everything to gain by simply staying away from their opponents and chucking projectiles until the cows come home. After all, there's no ammo system in this game unless your name is Hero. That would be a very ostentatious example of camping, but as I said before, the line between camping and defensive play blurs very easily. Turtling is more subtle in appearance but equally if not more consequential in fighting games, as unlike the literal definition of camping, you really can't stay in one place indefinitely, the map is too small for that. Instead, most players constantly guard against attacks in the corner of the screen and strike only when their opponent is vulnerable, playing into the concept of threat bubble awareness. This is divided into 4 subgroups: air camping, platform camping, planking, and circle camping, although all 4 of them involve much of the same thing. To avoid inundating you with more semantics, this is what we'll be talking about for the remainder of the video. Air camping is the act of staying away from the opponent by utilizing the character's ability to remain airborne for extended periods of time. This is most often performed by multi-jumpers like Kirby, Jigglypuff, Pit, what have you, although Samus can extend her air time via down special while Peach can float in the air. Platform camping is more or less the same as air camping, only you're jumping from platform to platform instead of hovering in the air. While seen as a more limited version of air camping, it can be effective against any opponents with a grounded touch of death. Luigi with 0 to deaths, Little Mac with KO punch, that kind of stuff. Planking is a more antiquated practice on account of ledge regrab no longer granting invincibility as a Smash 4, but anyone with really high vertical coverage can repeatedly shark under the ledge to get their opponent away from it for a more safe recovery. Ridley and DDD can both do this by combining their far-reaching up airs with their multi-jumps, or Steve can place a block underneath them and do so that way, making him the only character in Ultimate who can legitimately plank. Finally, circle camping is the process of constantly fleeing from your opponent by going from one side of the stage to the other through any means, and is considered the most difficult form of camping to contest as some characters flat out do not have the speed to catch up. The most emblematic example of this would be Sonic, whose mobility far eclipses anyone else's, and why Sonic mains have a penchant for opting for timeout strategies on occasion, leading us to the overall reason why camping is such a prevalent aspect of the game: time. No matter what method of camping is used, all of them are effective in one way or another purely because of time. Standard tournament games have a finite amount of time to prevent either player from stalling the match for too long. If and when the clock runs out, whoever has more stocks wins by default, and if both players have the same number, then it comes down to whoever has the lower percent. In other words, if both players are at 3 stocks but you have 0% while they have 0.1, you can theoretically win the game if you never advance the game state. This very condition adds further incentive for players to avoid unnecessarily exposing themselves, as simply being at a lower percent than your opponent is considered an advantage in and of itself. In the minds of most players, the only time they should interact is when they have the highest possible risk to reward ratio, and camping is one way they can increase that. While generally unfavored in comparison to aggressive fighting, the ability to camp and subsequently the ability to break through opposing camping has a major influence on a fighter's competitive viability, and is one of the main reasons why speed and mobility, or lack thereof, affects a character so much. Sonic is one of the best characters in Smash because he can out-camp anyone else in the game, and by a significant margin too. It doesn't always come down to mobility though, as even the fastest character can still suffer an occasional hit by the slowest. The idea is to make it as favorable for you to come out of that interaction on top. Generally in Smash, making the first move is dangerous because you exhaust your resources before they do and thus render yourself vulnerable to attack. Steve may not be the fastest character in the game, but through block placement and mining, he pressures his opponent to get up close, since if they don't, he gets a full inventory of materials, but if and when they do, the blocks make it difficult for them to outright attack them, and while they're busy trying to break down the wall, Steve can use all manner of attacks to punish them for doing so. A more common yet amazing example of platform camping features the man, the myth, the meta slave Waidu. On a side note, Zach, if you're watching this, please just main me brawler. Stop jumping from meta to meta characters, my guy, please. SmashCon's coming up soon. Focus on me brawler, you'll do fine. Anyways, Zach and I went to a local the day before Collision 2023, and in a set against Luigi Kid during Game 3, you'll notice he stays on Pyra for the majority of the game, platform camping on occasion, and spamming landing down air. Not only is this to avoid getting grabbed and dying at 0, but to also put the onus on Luigi to challenge Pyra in the air, an outcome in favor of Pyra because for Luigi to challenge Pyra, he has to meet her in the air, taking away the threat of a 0 to death via grab, and more importantly, his double jump, giving him fewer resources than Pyra, dramatically diminishing his pressure. Thing is, Luigi has no choice but to go after her, since if he doesn't and the clock runs out, he will lose by technicality. This was without a doubt the safest way for Waidu to win the set, which he did so convincingly. Final example of time pressure is during Momocon when Sonics fought against Didi. To be perfectly honest, the set was a joke, a complete meme of a match. However, it was arguably the best case study of camping's effectiveness. It may look like Didi was derping around, but realistically there was nothing he could have done if Sonics was hell-bent on timing him out. Steve may have minecart and anvil for burst movement options, but they're linear in nature, while the character himself has some of the worst movement in the game both on the ground and in the air. It doesn't matter if Didi racks up a full inventory of materials, he can never get close enough to use them, and even if he attempted to, it will be very easy for Sonics to see him coming and act accordingly. This put Didi in an impossible situation. Sonics has the stock lead, placing the onus on Didi to make a move, but he can't make a move with a favorable risk to reward ratio, which causes them to ultimately give up and mess around for the rest of the match. It's not that he didn't want to win, he just didn't see an easy way to win because there was none. Sonics held all the cards, and it's in his best interest to take the game-winning play, which he did. Was it the most entertaining match to watch? Absolutely not, but he played to win the game and checkmated his opponent perfectly. Using time as a pressure tool is being exercised more and more these days, much to the dismay of the audience, and sometimes the players. Every once in a while, a monk-has-inducing timeout scenario like the Buzz vs Tweak or Leo vs Sonics can be tense and exciting to watch, but over time it can be exhausting to watch, and even to play, begging the question, is it healthy for the game? The debate over whether camping should be made illegal has existed since the dawn of time. Technically speaking, you're not exploiting any glitch or bug in the game, nor are you using any illicit third-party programs to gain advantage. At the same time, camping inherently circumvents much of the effort usually required to get a desired reward. Calling back to the example of Samus players using only neutral B and side B for the entirety of a match, it's a very straightforward way to win. If you hit your opponent with enough missiles and charge shots, they will eventually die without you ever having to physically confront them. But it comes off as an ingenuine way to win the game in that you don't have to show aptitude in advantage, disadvantage, combos, juggling, edge guarding, ledge trapping, kill confirms, and others. All you're doing at that point is smashing the B button. Granted, it's not like the opponent won't adapt and punish them for doing so, but it's seen as unsportsmanlike or dishonorable as it doesn't fit the agreed upon opinion of how the game is meant to be played. In the eyes of most people, camping to win is the same as punching someone in the face to win a game of Monopoly. There's nothing in the rulebook saying you can't physically incapacitate your opponent to prevent them from taking their turn, or maybe there is, I haven't read a Monopoly book in years. But point being, you didn't win by conventional means. On the other hand, seeing as how camping takes into account positional awareness and management of threat bubbles, some argue that they are winning by conventional means. If you have someone who can perpetually outmaneuver your opponent, why in your right mind wouldn't you take advantage of it? Like, why would Jigglypuff intentionally go face to face with Sephiroth if doing so means certain death for her? Would you willingly abandon a place of safety just because it's the quote-unquote honorable thing to do? Probably not, right? And we're not talking about your average 15-man local or elite smash, we're talking national and international tournaments. Players will do everything within their allowed faculties to win games. It's a very hard catch-22 situation. Obviously we're playing a video game and video games are ultimately meant to be fun and enjoyable, with competition adding more fuel to the fire for an even more exciting experience. But we also have to remember that the goal of any competitor is to win, leaving them torn between whether a fun and exciting match matters more than whether they win or lose. And no matter how much we try to say that it's just a game, deep down, no one likes losing. I don't care who you are. Such is the case when social aspects clash with video game aspects. In the eyes of the game, camping operates within the boundaries of its rules, making it perfectly allowed. But socially, camping is seen as selfish and unsportsmanlike behavior. I think it has to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. As a game designer myself, these are questions that developers rack their brain trying to find the ideal win-win, but sadly, we may never reach a final verdict on whether camping is good or bad for the game. Personally, I believe camping is fair if done with a purpose. It just comes down to what that purpose is. For example, a Sonic player timing out his opponent, as much as it burns my tongue to say it, is a perfectly acceptable strategy. It's justifiable. As for others, again, case by case basis. Anyways, that's gonna be it for today. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments down below, and as always, I'd appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other discussion videos if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.